This lesson is going to focus on making the connection of meiosis into actually determining what the probability is of having certain offspring. So to start off with, I have here my female. This is the egg, or better said, it's the sex cell that's going to then develop into being eggs. And here's my male, whose sex cell will then develop to being sperms. And just as a reminder, these are diploid, and here we start seeing the haploid cells right over here. So the genotype of this female is, get the pen to work, is big A, little a. So she has one chromosome that is big A and another chromosome that is little a. You notice that it's already replicated. I figured that we can work that way. And you have the male who has a genotype of little a, little a. So that means that this chromosome has the recessive trait as well as this one. So when meiosis happens, remember, one of those chromosomes goes into one cell, the other one goes into the other. They split again so that of these sister chromatids, one is pulled to one cell, then the other, and so forth. That means that the female, when you look at her sex gametes, she only can contribute a big A, and she can contribute a small a. So for that reason, these are the two alleles that she could have in her eggs. And so what we do is we create Punnett squares on probability. So we know she has a big A and a little a. And for the male, though, on the other hand, if you look at all of the alleles, the male can only actually donate a little a. And so we have him being little a, and that would be perfectly fine. You can actually erase this last square to make it actually look like this. And so that means that your Punnett square, because there's only the option of little a, would be that you have a big A, little a, and I got that by having this big A move across, this little a move down, and little a, little a. So again, it's all about probability. In this case, when one of these eggs and one of these sperm meet, you can have this option of little a twice. And we can take a look. See, there's that other little a, little a. Then there's the option of this big A joining with that one. So that's big A, little a. And this one joining with that one. Okay, and another big A, little a. So here's where you see how those things could actually come about. So that means that for their offspring, this is the baby right here, there is a 1 out of 2 chance that it is big A, little a, which means you have a 50% chance of big A, little a, and you have a 1 out of 2 chance for being little a, little a. And that's also a 50% chance, okay? Which means that you have a 1 out of 2 chance of having the dominant trait, and having a 1 out of 2 chance of having the recessive trait. And we call this square here a Punnett square, and it's just a probability based on meiosis. And a lot of students don't quite realize that meiosis has a huge part to play in that. So let's do one more Punnett square based on what sort of gametes we can get. So let's assume we have an individual mom, just because, having a genotype of big A, little a, and dad having a genotype of big A, little a. We then go, okay, now if these go through meiosis, what are the choices, what are the options of gametes or alleles that they can give, of alleles specifically? So you have an A, big A, and you have a small a that mom can contribute. And for dad, he can contribute a big A and a little a. So let's create a Punnett square. And in this case, you notice there are 2 options here. So mom is over here, big A on top, little a on the bottom. And dad has 2 options too. So in that case, we need to have that extra box. So if we do our slide across and drop down, big A, This one is big A, little a. This one is big A, little a. And this one is little a, little a. And as you notice, this one here, I could have said, oh, little a, big A, but we always start with a capital. So it's just a semantics that these two are more or less the same. So in this case, if I were to do my probability, it looks like I have 1 out of 4 chance of having the genotype big A, because there's only 1 out of these 4. For having big A, little a, it looks like it is a 2 out of 4, or we can say a 1/2 chance of having big A, little a. And then for the last one, we have a 1/4 of a chance of having little a, little a. Now, how does that look in terms of phenotype? So remember, this is the genotype. And for phenotype, that means that these are all dominant traits. So we have a 3 out of 4 chance of showing the dominant trait and a 1 out of 4 chance of having the recessive trait. And we can also write those in percents. That happens too. So 75% chance and a 25% chance. Okay? So those are your simple Punnett squares. And these are where you have traits that are just based on one gene. Now we can also create Punnett squares where they're simple Punnett squares, but they have something that's a little bit different. And so in this case here, we'll have this be that A equals red, big A, little a equals pink, and little a equals white. And we call this incomplete dominance. And more or less, that is just where you have both things being expressed. So big A is clearly red, little a is clearly white, and when you mix red and white together, you get the color pink. So in this case, if you have big A, little a breeding with big A, little a, you have the same Punnett square than the one we did before, but the results are that you have 3 different phenotypes versus just 2. So in this case, 1/4 will be red, 2/4 will be pink, and 1/4 will be white. So you can always tell when something is showing incomplete dominance in that you have 3 phenotypes instead of just 2. So then we also have another example where I'll erase this here. Let's get an eraser. Where, let's say you have a heterozygous individual, and in this case, both traits are shown. So, let's see if that works. So let's say this is white, and this particularly happens in cats, and this is brown, and we'll make it be fur. And for this, if they are big A, little a, they are spotted white and brown. So if you have a cat that has in every one of its cells the big A genotype, it has white fur. If it has little a, then it has brown fur. But if it is heterozygous, it actually is spotted, so it's showing white and brown fur. And it's similar to this. You just more or less will see that if you have 2 cats that are spotted, what are the chances of getting a spotted cat? So if I erase this, the Punnett square is the same. It's just now, okay, it looks like from those 2 spotted cats, their offspring have a 1/4 chance of having white fur and a 2/4 chance of having spotted fur and a 1/4 chance of having brown fur. So when we have this, we call this codominance. That means both dominate in their phenotype. Okay, so that's called codominance, where before, where it was pink, it was called incomplete dominance because you have a little bit mixture of both. So the last one I want to go through is a more complicated one, which deals with, okay, what happens, what is the chance of having two different traits be passed on to an offspring? So I'll show you what that looks like right now. So for the next example, we're going to be looking at the probability of getting two different traits within a child. So let's say, for example, I want to focus on two pairs of those 23 chromosomes we have in humans. So I want to look at the genes that have the allele of A and the genes that have the allele of E. So this individual here has a big A, little a, so that's what I write as a genotype, and a big E, little e. Okay, and I just want to focus on those things. And let's say that A is tongue rolling, and E stands for widow's peak. Okay, so this other individual, okay, this person, so here's mom, here's dad, also has a genotype of big A and little a, and big E and little e. So we need to go into figuring out, well, what sort of alleles can they actually give us? So when you look at this, you have to break down all the possible combinations. Well, when meiosis happens, this big A could be separated with this big E, so that could be one of the gametes. We could have this big A be separated with this little e, right? And this is something that you did in the quiz. We could have this little a be separated with this big E, and we can have this little a separated with the little e. And this is exactly the same for this individual over here. So we could have big A, little e, excuse me, big A, big E, big A, little e, little a, big E, and little a, little e. So what is the probability of getting those traits in every child? Or better said, in a certain child. So here again, you take the parent and all the probable combinations they have. So big E, big A, big E, big A, little e, little a, big E, and little a, little e. So we'll draw our lines here. All right, from here, we have the same combinations from this parent. Okay, and we'll go down. So I will show the first example, and then I will finish it off, and then we'll talk about the results. So the big A moves across, big A drops down, big E, big E. Let's do this one. Big A moves across, big A drops down, big E drops down, little e. Okay, and I'll pause for a second and finish that off. Okay, and so more or less here is what you have as a completed chart. So when we look at this chart, these are all the probabilities, or all the possible combinations that the children can have of these two individuals. So then we ask, well, what is the chance of an individual having having this genotype? And you take a look here and you go, okay, well, it looks like there's a 1 out of 16 chance of one of the offspring, one of the children having that genotype. You can ask another question like, how many children will be tongue rollers and have widow's peak? So how many will show a dominant trait? So they need to show both at the same time. So this one is a tongue roller and shows widow's peak. So there's one. Here's another one that's a tongue roller and that shows widow's peak. Remember, I'm looking for those dominant traits. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. This one does not. This one does not have widow's peak, so we're not going to include that one. This one does. This one does not. This one does. This one does. This one doesn't because it can't roll its tongue. This individual can roll their tongue and have widow's peak, and that's pretty much it right there. So now I need to count, and I go, okay, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 16 have tongue rollers and have widow's peak. And that's how you do crosses that have two possible answers. And there's the end of the lesson.